Hi everyone, and welcome again to my audiovisual channel. My name is Gabriela Handal. I'm a draftsman. If you're new, welcome back. Today I'm recording episode, give me a second, 82 of this podcast, A Conversation About Art. And I'm going to be talking with artist Alisa Smith Williams, who works exclusively in digital media. And I've been wanting to talk to somebody who does that for a while now because I'm curious about it. And I have pending talking to someone who only uses the AI art generators, but hopefully I find somebody like that soon. So yes, today's artist is Alisa Smith Williams. That's who I'll be talking to today. If you would like to support my audiovisual channel, you can do so by liking and sharing this video, leaving a comment, and also by subscribing. These do not have, these are for free, no additional cost to you. And you can also, if you want to have an additional cost to you, you can purchase my drawings directly from my website. You can purchase prints of my drawings. You can leave me a tip, and you can also purchase crafts that I make. I currently, for now, still have an eBay that seems to not be working. I'm thinking of maybe making an e-crater, which is like a store. I don't know. I'll be updating about that at some point. But anyway, thank you very much for your time watching this video. Make sure that you leave a comment and let me know what you think about it, if you enjoy it or if you hate it as well. So thank you very much and enjoy the episode. Record on this computer. All right, so welcome everyone to A Conversation About Art. Thank you, Alisa Smith, for agreeing to talk to me today. You are episode, let me check. We're in the 80s now. You're episode 82.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much again for agreeing to talk to me today. Please tell our listeners and viewers who you are and what you do.
All right. Well, my name is Alisa Smith Williams. It's not hyphenated, though, just Smith and Williams. And I am talking to you today from Central Virginia, where I live, where it's 100 degrees outside. So I'm trying to stay cool. I am a digital artist, and my day job is that I work as a forensic psychiatrist, which I've done for about 30 years or so. So it's an interesting occupation, and one that I think calls for having some downtime and some things that are gratifying to one as avocations. So I've really embraced doing the art over the last few years.
Okay. That is very interesting. I don't know very many, you said forensic psychologist?
Psychiatrists. We're the ones that prescribe medicine. It's very similar, but yes.
You prescribe medicine then to the criminal type people or something?
Actually, right now, that is what I'm doing. I'm working in a correctional facility that's a maximum security female facility. And so I work with the inmates there. In the past, I've done a lot more court work, and so I wasn't really prescribing in that instance. But that's basically the difference between psychiatry and psychology. We are trained as MDs, and so we can write prescriptions. They're trained as PhDs, so they do things for advantage.
Okay. Yes, I think I've only ever met another one. No, I mean, that person was something, whatever. Okay, I want to talk about this whole digital art thing. How long have you been doing it, and why did you start doing it? And what are your tools for making the digital work?
Okay. Well, it started for me, actually, it's been a little bit of a circuitous path because I initially was doing photography, and I ended up getting sick, and I wasn't really able to continue with the photography very well because I had some fractures in my back and some other issues that had come up. So, and I also had to have this procedure done that required me to be hospitalized for a month and then out of the hospital in a step-down facility for a month, and had a lot of time on my hands. And so at that time, having realized it was just difficult for me to hold a camera with one hand and focus it with the other, I started teaching myself Photoshop, which is a little bit like teaching yourself astrophysics, I think. It's just sort of big dinosaur, that Frankenstein thing that's been put together over the years. And I started to teach myself to use a program online that does digital three-dimensional rendering. So the advantage to that was that you could sort of have models without actually having models. So you would be using these characters that have been created for you. And it's a lot like photography because you set it up sort of like a photograph, and you work on doing the lights that are set up, and how you want your focus to be and what kind of camera settings you want. So I liked it from that standpoint, and I did that for a couple of years, I think. And then last year, just about this time last year, maybe a little bit before that, I started to get involved in doing AI, which is probably a bad word or a bad acronym for a lot of people in the art world. And I hope not. Maybe at the end of the day today, they would feel a little bit differently about it, because I sort of use that as a springboard. I don't just take things hot off the computer and expect people to accept them as mine. So usually what I'm doing is a lot of collaging and sort of overpainting and texturing and a lot of different changes to those images. Often what I like to do at the very last step is take all of my steps, which might be 40 or 50 steps in Photoshop, and make a group out of those, and I can kind of title it off and on, and I can see for myself, because I want to know that I'm not just putting something up that looks like what a machine spit out for me. So with respect to the tools that I use right now, it's primarily my computer. My husband actually talked me into getting a new monitor over the last week or so, and it's nice and big, so I'm really enjoying that. But I use my computer, I use Photoshop, I use Midjourney as the main AI tool that I use. And I still use Digital Art Zone, DAZ, it's called Daz.com, which is the 3D modeling program that I was talking about. So I still use that to some extent. I'm also kind of an avid collector of all kinds of textures and oddball little pieces of ephemera. So those come from all over the place. Sometimes I make them, and sometimes I find them, and sometimes I buy them. So those are my primary tools and what I'm using mostly in a day-to-day way.
Okay. But the things that you're saying that you collect, those are physical objects.
No, they're actually not. They're little bits and pieces that I'm getting offline. There are a lot of sites where you can get royalty-free bits and pieces of ephemera online, little vintage bits and scraps of art that may be flowers or musical instruments or whatever. And then the textures, I make those a lot myself. And also I've used a lot my own photographs that I've done in the past, back when I was shooting more than I am now. So I use those as backgrounds a lot too.
Okay. Aren't the ephemera type stuff called, don't those have a name? Don't some people like make those for a living? Because I was taking, am taking, I just haven't followed it up on a free course on Blender. And one of the guy who made the course for free, he can make it for free because what he does for a living is that he has a whole company where he sells like those like 3D objects that you can use to make a scene, like a
yes.
Aren't they called artifacts? Isn't that what it's called?
Sometimes, yes. I think there probably are different terms for them. There are a lot of people on Etsy who sell some of those images for $1 or $2. Frequently they come from maybe old magazines, old art, and somebody has kind of laboriously clipped them out and made clip art out of them. Sometimes I do that laborious clipping out myself because it's easier to get it done. And frequently I'll find myself stuck and think I really need something here, and I don't know what it is. And so I just kind of go online and start looking and seeing what I can find, and that breaks the logjam.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, the whole AI thing is I have nothing against it, by the way. I mean, I'm a, you know, I'm traditional. I draw
Mhm.
with graphite on paper and stuff, but I have nothing against it. I watched a very positive video on the subject after watching lots of videos that were whining rather than arguing against the AI.
Yeah.
I found them very irritating and irrational in the arguments. It was very frustrating to watch. But then I found this very positive one, which basically convinced me that, you know, these people that are whining about it are being kind of alarmist about it, and they're really unnecessarily negative.
Well, I've come across everything from people who sort of think that, you know, it's going to be the rise of the machines, and this is the way that the machines are going to eventually get the best of all of us. And, you know, I don't know. I had a very spirited debate with somebody that I ended up having to block on Instagram because she was just so kind of rabid about the subject. But her point was that I was trying to say I don't really understand how it's too much different than photography, because I actually spent less time on my photographs than I do on these images. And she said, but you know, a camera, some human being has made a camera, and the human being is holding the camera, and there might be a model who's a human being. Well, you can say the same thing about AI, really. Some human being made that program. I'm the person who's controlling the program now. And I know that just looking back through art history, you'll find that anytime there's sort of a new movement, there's just a lot of resistance to that. There always has been. And I feel like this is kind of here to stay. So the people that have decided to whine about it are just kind of being left in the dark. I make a very strong effort, as most of the people that I know who are ethical people and meticulous people, not to just absolutely take the work of another artist. I'm not using another artist as my primary exemplar. And I just kind of like where the whole thing takes me, because it usually takes me in some directions that I didn't even expect to go. And it's that serendipity and surprise that I get with it that I like a lot.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's funny that you say that both you and the person that you were talking to on Instagram mentioned cameras, because I just published a video where I mused precisely about a parallel between the two. And really what I was thinking is, what I continue to think is rather that the camera is kind of like the grandfather of the AI, in the sense that both, you know, like the making of the image occurs within the device. So like in the camera, so whether you're using analog or digital, the image itself occurs within the camera. Likewise in the AI, it's like the AI is the one who makes the image. And it's like the resulting image is, you know, kind of like a collaboration between the human that is manning the device, or like giving the device instructions, and the device itself. And it's like the AI is definitely more advanced than the camera. But then that is why the camera is kind of like the grandfather or grandpa or whatever of the AI art generator. And I just think that's really cool, because that kind of ancestry sort of is applicable to lots of things that we enjoy today in the present. Because, for example, before we had chemistry, we had alchemy, right?
Yes.
And alchemy was like, oh, kind of woo, you know, but we had to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere in both cases. And I mean, cameras as well have their own precedents, like not just the analog camera, but somebody with whom I was talking about this very subject on the YouTube video, he talks about printmaking and engraving. And in a way, you know, because the person isn't directly making the image, and the image happens in like this chemical process of printmaking, then that is maybe an even more rudimentary program, you know, than the camera and then the AI. And I just think that's cool, and it's very interesting.
Yes, I think
think about it that
many
way.
parallels like that actually apply quite well. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Okay, so okay, so I'd like to know why, when you went from, okay, I want to know two things. All right, so first I'd like to know, all right, give me a second. What did it feel like for you to make image when you were doing them only with photography? And what does it feel like to do them now with photography and other stuff. And I also want to know, why did you decide to incorporate the AI art generators to the menagerie of tools?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think I sort of lapsed into photography because my husband and I had moved onto some property that was out in the country, and I was sort of gobsmacked by all these little bugs and wildflowers that I just
You
hadn't
moved from the
noticed.
city?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
that makes
they're
perfect
very
sense.
urban.
Yeah.
Very urban. And so, you know, I loved the chance to kind of really get these pretty close-up shots, these macro shots. But, you know, that's honestly a very punishing medium because there's so many people who do it and so many people who do it so well, you know, that it's sort of hard to hold your head up there. I had gotten involved in Instagram mostly to stay in touch, I think, at that time with my brother, but I developed a little following. And so when I was no longer able to photograph, I felt really sad about it. But I think what I would say is that the introduction of AI most particularly has just been remarkably freeing to me, because there's almost like nowhere that I can't go if I want to. And I don't think I would have ever felt that I could do that with photography. I didn't really know people to model for me. I didn't have a good place to set up a studio. So it was difficult for me to do that. And it just felt very, very freeing, I think, to get involved in the AI work. And I got involved in it really just by curiosity. I just didn't really know what it was. And I thought I was hearing a lot about it. So I thought I would just play around with it. And once I did, I was hooked. And it's easy to become hooked. I probably I would say I've probably done more than 40,000 images. And of course, only maybe a tiny fraction of those ever actually survive, because they're not all very good, to be honest. You know, you have to, it's the same thing with taking pictures, and particularly macro. You know, you're just kind of firing away, and you might be out there for a couple of hours and get 2 or 3 frames that you really like because the wind's blowing or the sun is wrong or just whatever happens. So it's not too different really with AI. I get a lot of images that don't work for whatever reason or not, but then you just get that really nice serendipitous moment where you think this one is going to be great. So it's fun to work on those. And usually they kind of announce themselves, and I sort of have a sense about where I want to go with it in terms of the collaging and what I like to do with the image. So, you know, it's fun.
Okay. So when you were talking about how you end up in one of like the finalized images, you said there's 40 steps, kind of something like that?
Well, if you've worked in Photoshop, you know, you do it in layers. And so I may have, 40 or 50 different layers where I've had to go in and do overpainting and then go in and do some collaging and do some texturing. I usually take it through the camera raw process a couple of times.
What's the camera process?
So the camera raw thing, if you're not used to working in Photoshop, they have sort of some tools that are built in. And one of them is what's called camera raw, which you actually can go in and manipulate everything in the same way that you would with a camera if you were working with a camera in that way. You can take using sliders, you can take the tint a little bit over in one direction. You can take the contrast over, the brightness. You can do sharpening. There are a lot of different steps that you can do with that. So you can actually sort of make that image be something that looks quite a bit different when you get finished with it. It just refines the image, I think.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So I think that makes a lot of sense that you would do a lot to the, just all of the images that you're using together, like as your source material, I suppose. I don't know if that's what you call it, but to your source material, so that the resulting image feels like it's yours, because, you did, I guess you kind of hinted at or insinuated at first that it's not just whatever the AI, spits out, because I guess besides kind of instructing it with a prompt and then maybe tweaking the prompt you know, that, I mean, or at least I imagine in a sense that the resulting image might not feel like you made it, even though you gave the device instructions. But then, you know, when you, upon looking at the image, you're like, oh, that doesn't look right, in the sense that it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I wouldn't have done it that way, you know, like I wouldn't have done that, you know. So like, clearly there's lots of decisions in the resulting images from a prompt that you know, probably make it feel like that image is not one's own, you know, one's own product, you know. So does that sound right?
That's an interesting point. And yes, there's a lot of that plays into that. My favorite thing to do with the AI engine is just to put very little into it, because I find that I just get much more interesting results if I just kind of maybe give it a line from a poem, maybe a line from a song that I like. Not do very much. A lot of people will actually tell it, you know, exactly what, you know, where do I want the camera? What kind of camera lens I want, the coloration, all of that. I sort of steer clear of that, and I like that serendipity. But you and I know that that you're going to ask Gabriela at some point, what is art? And there's some things I had thoughts about that I wanted to say, but one of them is that in my earliest incarnation as any kind of an artist, I was a poet. And I came from a family where my dad was really just a stellar watercolorist. And we kind of joke that he's in the permanent collection at the Metropolitan because he won a competition and they never gave him the painting back. So now we just say, wow, he's in the permanent collection then. But he was a wonderful artist, and my mother was a very good cartoonist, and I could never draw. So I was really kind of under that shadow a lot, and I started writing. And so I did a fair amount of that for a number of years, and I got into some nice literary magazines that were national, and I had some success with it. But I always had this weird sense when I was working like that I was sort of channeling something from outside myself.
Yeah.
The better poems were things that were just almost felt like this energy was flowing through me and making that happen. So it's a little bit the same with the AI.
Yes, okay.
It's kind of not like it's really mine, but it is mine. And then I can do something else with it to make it more mine.
Okay. Yeah, you know, that reminds me of a couple of things. It reminds me of my mom, who also wrote, and she told me once or twice that she would just wake up in the night, write something down, and then she would just not remember that she wrote it or something.
Exactly.
And it happens to me. I mean, I'm aware when I'm drawing because I have to be awake. I'm not sure, you know, unless I slept walk, I'm not sure that I would be able to make drawings that way. But don't ask me how I made any of my drawings, because I don't remember how I made anything. It's like if there's a drawing in particular from the past that I'm like, wow, that drawing is cool. It's like, I wonder how did I make that to try to do something else? And it's like, no, I don't freaking know. I don't know. And so that, you know, that kind of draws a parallel with the AI art generators, and whether it's like, who made the image? Because it's like, if I don't remember how to make the work, then like you're saying, it's like, who wrote the poem? It's like, who made the drawing in that case, if I don't remember how I did it, you know? So, and you know, because when I was musing, because I told my husband about this parallel between the camera and the AI art generator, about how the making of the image happens within the device, and it, you know, it's the device that physically makes the image and not the person manning the device. And he was like, well, but you know, if you're holding a pencil to make your drawing, then who is making the drawing? Is it you or the pencil? You know, so it's like, I mean, I think that's a valid question, because obviously the drawing does not happen without the pencil. It's like, if that's the tool that I'm using, then there's no resulting image without the tool that I'm using. You see what I'm saying?
That's true. So, but is the art really the tool, or is it what's moving through you that is causing you to do these things with that tool?
Sure.
And that's always kind of how I have felt about it. So for me, and I had that same experience your mother did, that when I was younger, I can remember times when I would actually wake up in the middle of the night, and I was still young enough that I was living at home with my family and I didn't want to wake people up. So I'd actually go in the bathroom and sit and write, because I knew that was the place where I wouldn't wake people up. But if you don't get it right at that moment, the next morning, you're never going to remember it. It's just gone. It's gone. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
pretty cool. There's certain things about the function of the human body and how it's just basically connected with everything else, nature or just whatever, just
Everything.
everything that it's really it's sci-fi, supernatural, whatever you want to call it. I think I read a quote by Tesla that I really like. I'm not even entirely sure if it was him, but I think it was him that, if we studied, with scientific studies and stuff like this kind of mystical seeming stuff, we would advance way more, way faster than we are with all the mathematical. And I mean, not that there's anything wrong with the more logical, mathematical stuff. That's great. Too. Yeah, of course. But, there's this whole thing about balancing and like having the curiosity and the desire to learn about just both things, because both are necessary and both are here, both are present, and we need both. Okay, but okay. Okay, so all right, so Mrs. Smith Williams, what is art in your opinion?
So we talked a little bit about that. I was giving that some thought, and it's kind of a two-pronged answer, I think, because art is very different from the standpoint of the consumer versus the standpoint of the producer. So as consumers of art, we might elect to enjoy art because we like it on our wall, or maybe we like the adornment, the physical adornment of it, or maybe there's just a movie that has brought about some evocative response. I can tell you as a consumer, I don't listen to very much classical music, but I can tell you that I just fall to pieces every single time I hear certain pieces of music. The very ending of the Firebird Suite is that way for me. I just go to pieces when I hear that. It's just such an evocative, beautiful piece of music. So there's something I think that happens at that interface with us as consumers that it causes us to experience something, probably our own culture, our own selves, in a way that we haven't before. And it's interesting to me that the same thing can draw the same response so many times, so that I can listen to that one piece of music and I will always have that response. So I'm not really sure where that's even, maybe that's based in memory, in my own sort of emotional muscle memory or something. I don't know. As producers of art, though, I do feel like there's this pull to create. I can remember a pull to create, like a magnetism that sort of pulls you to do that. One of the earliest memories that I have as a child, I might have been maybe 3 or so, and I would say to my mother, I need to make something. And there was this sense of like urgency about it. She would kind of sit me down with, pencils or crayons or paper or whatever, so I could make something. But I didn't. There was just this real need to do that, and that sort of then verged into the need to create with the poetry that I felt was sort of moving through me from somewhere else at times. I feel like there's a bit of an interface for artists between art and, which is a physical process, and art, which is a more spiritual process. And maybe as I've gotten older, I've become more spiritual, but I sort of feel like actual art lives at that interface. It's kind of knocking on the door of what's outside the physical world. Maybe it's something like what you were talking about a moment ago, that all of those things that we scientifically may discount, but that have great meaning in our lives. I think art fills for me that gap and helps me to find to make some sense of things and to find some understanding. It's also a wonderful outlet and has been very helpful to me because, things in life can be stressful, and so it helps with that. But I think it does a lot more than that, because I think it's something that actually pulls on a part of us that's very primitive and very original, and helps us to get that into a place where we can make some sense of it.
Okay. Would you mind telling me what the word evoking, to evoke, what does the term mean?
Evoking is bringing about a response. It's pulling from you a response. Yeah. So it's actually something other than just that joke made me laugh. It's something that actually just really pulls something out of you.
Okay, so it evoked laughter.
It can evoke any kind of emotion. So tears, laughter.
Yeah, but I mean, like the definition of the word. If so, like you said just now, that something made you laugh, whatever it was. So then, whatever it was evoked laughter. It's
Yes.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I'm curious about what you said about how you've become more spiritual as you've gotten older. Would you mind elaborating on that? I mean, you know, were you an atheist or what?
No, never an atheist, but I don't think that really what I do now is subscribe to any particular religion, but it's just a sense of connectedness with things around me, of connectedness with what my vision, my understanding of God is. It could be God or Allah or whatever you want to call it, but there's something bigger. There's just something that's bigger than me and bigger than all of this. And I feel a greater connection to that as I get older. That's probably a natural part of aging for a lot of people, because as you get older, you're trying to make a little bit more sense of your life and to understand what it means. So that's probably part of it. But I think also that I have felt over the last 10 years or so that I have sort of developed almost like a relationship with God, where we're pals, we're buddies, you know. I feel like, you know, that's something that I can count on, that I know is going to be present in my life and going to help me through difficult times. But that said, there really also, I think, is just, there's so much unknown about, but, you know, my husband and I talk about scientific theories, like the idea that there's this thing called dark matter that exists. And, you know, in any atom, there's a tiny little nucleus, and then there are these electrons that are spinning football fields away. I mean, really a long distance away. So there's a lot of space in there, but something's happening in that space. And so to me, I think that sort of sums up to some extent what spirituality is, that it's just the things that are happening in the spaces that we don't see.
Yeah.
But they're still there.
Yes.
And they're still real.
Yeah. Okay. I like that a lot. And especially I like that you made the, like, you know, the explanation, the relationship with strictly physics, science sort of thing, which is, you know, the atoms and stuff.
And I'm a scientist. I mean, I work as a physician, so that's what I do for a living. And it's interesting to me that within my field, there are a lot of people who probably are atheists. I don't know. There are a lot of people who really feel like you do one or the other. You do science or you do spiritual things, religion or whatever. But there are also a lot of people who are finding ways to meld those things together, and that's important, I think.
Yeah.
You know, important for us to keep that balance in life and to understand it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. You know, it reminds me of Carl Sagan, because I mean, I never watched the show or anything. I only read Cosmos, the book, and you know, in the praise of the books where they have it in the back of other people who read the book, and they're like, oh, this book is amazing. You know, somebody described the book as iridescent. And I was like, that is perfect for this book, because, so like, you know, lots of times you'll hear that, oh, you know, the scientist or the doctor is jaded because you've seen so many bodies on the slab and cut up and whatever, that it becomes kind of meaningless, and the doctor kind of supposedly loses kind of like the respect or the fascination or the whatever it is for the human body. But in the case of Carl Sagan, and, you know, maybe in your case as well, knowing more about something actually makes it more impressive. You know, so it's like, so yes, yeah. So like kind of like the explanation is like, what? The explanation is awesome. That's really cool. You know, so, and you know, I think that kind of draws the connection with what you were saying of how there is something more. And, you know, for whomever it is, like, it doesn't strictly have to be God, it doesn't have to be a God or whatever. Because, for example, for me, I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I wouldn't say that I'm strictly an atheist, but I mean, I don't believe in a God specifically. I kind of, you know, if I worshipped anything in that way, it would be nature. So I would say that I kind of like believe sort of in Mother Nature. Yes. And so I really like the idea of her kind of as the
The higher being, sort of.
yeah, the higher being, but what's the referee kind of, in a
Yes.
way,
Yeah.
that is like,
Hmm.
that is just like hands off, just watching stuff
Yes.
happening kind of, in a
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
And but also it's like allowing the amazing stuff to happen, which happens for it, it has its reasons for happening, but also like allowing the
Hmm.
chaos, which also permits just more amazing things to come out of the unknown, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I really like that connection there.
Hmm.
And because yeah, I don't think knowing how something works should make the individual jaded about stuff. It's like, oh, the cranks and whatever. And it's like, I actually get really annoyed at that kind of cynicism. Be like,
Well,
oh, I know how it works. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
what I think I have learned after this many years of practicing medicine is how little we actually know.
Oh,
And
yeah,
there
yeah.
are so many doctors who kind of sit on that pedestal of, well, we've really pretty much got it all sussed out, and we sort of know exactly what, this and that isn't. We don't know anything.
Yeah.
There's so much that we have yet to know anything about. And being in psychiatry, I can tell you that, like, the 90s was supposed to be, they were calling it the decade of the brain, and we were really going to figure out how the brain worked, and we didn't learn anything. I mean, we you can take 10 people with the same symptoms and give them all the same medicine. They're going to have 10 different experiences, because everybody's brain is like a supercomputer, and it's so different from everyone else's brain. So we really don't know nearly enough about any of that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And you know what else I really like about what you said just now about how
Mm-hmm.
everybody's going to have each, if you have the 10 individuals with similar symptoms and you give them medicines, they're all going to have
Mm-hmm.
like a different experience. It makes
Yes.
me think of something that I really like about both art and nature.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, art is derived from nature because we are nature and we're the ones making, anyway.
Yeah.
But about the iterative nature of both nature and art. So like, every time every time a new person is made, that person is a little bit different from the previous person that was made, chronologically.
Yes.
Whatever, and whatever type of counting that you want to think. It's like every new plant, even if it's the same plant, is a little bit different from the previous one.
Yeah.
And when you make your images, it's like every new one is a little bit different from the previous one. And when I make a drawing, it's a little bit different from the previous one, and this type of stuff. And I think that's just really cool. And it's like a really good way to explore and find new things. And maybe that's why we don't know anything.
I'm not sure why we don't know anything, but I think there's just so much to know. And suddenly, we feel like we've kind of built this Tower of Babel that we just kind of know everything that we need to. There's just very little more that we need to figure out. And I just don't believe that. I don't buy it.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, I actually, I've mused about the same subject also with my husband regarding scientific papers.
Mm-hmm.
And just scientific study in general, because so I think, the scientific method is pretty great, really. If you read about what you're supposed to do, if you want to follow the scientific method,
you actually do it, yes.
Yeah, if you follow the scientific method, it's like it looks really, really good. And it makes a lot of sense, I think the issue with the scientific method is that the person following the scientific method, it's necessary that the person following the method has a sense of curiosity and kind of like humility, in that when you get to the point where somebody else is supposed to try to kind of find holes in whatever you're proposing, it's like you have to be open to that analysis.
Right.
The scientist.
You should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also applicable to us as artists as well as producers of work, because when somebody, and also like as a parenthesis, I guess, the word criticism is like loaded with negativity, but criticism, it's a very unfortunate, but criticism means analysis, meaning that the person doing the criticism can note both positives and negatives. So it's like the person has to, should talk about both if the person sees both. Something like that also applicable to somebody following the scientific method. It's like, okay, I have this hypothesis. What do you think is good or bad about it? Tell me your opinion. And so it really seems like when it comes to scientific papers, not only is that whole thing lacking because, I mean, I think, I guess, really because of the human element, all of the humans
Absolutely.
involved.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of scientific research is now paid for by companies. And
Yeah.
so they may
Because
want
they're
to,
expensive, really.
they want to suppress findings sometimes that are not in their interest. So it's become a difficult thing. And, I hope we muddle through this phase and we get to a place where there's a lot more honesty in it, but that maybe is one of the only areas of medicine that I am jaded about. But I do feel like, sometimes people are just very closed to the idea that you could challenge someone else's findings, and you should. That's really what the scientific method is. You should do that. We shouldn't close areas of inquiry and say, now we've got the answer that we need. So I'd like to see things be more open again.
Yeah, one other thing about scientific papers, besides what you're saying, is that, I mean, and well, to be fair, I guess, this information comes for just one video that I saw on YouTube. I didn't go looking more about it because I can't say that I care really that much. But the video's argument was that a really important part of scientific paper, which is a different person trying to reproduce the results, exactly. Apparently that is sorely lacking, right? In the whole, literature, as they call it, the scientific literature, because it's more encouraged to look for to try to study novel hypotheses instead of trying to reproduce results from already existing scientific studies. And that, I think that's a big flaw in the whole thing. I
agree, but that really is a big part of the scientific method, is that you're supposed to do that part first and make sure that it's replicable and that you're getting the same results.
Yes. Okay. All right. So Mrs. Smith Williams, what is beauty in your opinion?
So that's a much more loaded question. It's very individual. I laugh all the time because one of the things that I like to do is images that are a little bit darker and more mystical in nature. And I love Halloween because I've already got all my Halloween pictures done. I just love doing those things. My husband will sometimes wander past behind me and say, I don't think you should be looking at stuff like that. Because he feels like it's, he's sort of a guy he likes classic beauty. And when I do those pieces, he's very honest about it and very kind about it. And wow, that looks great. But I like the darker things and he doesn't like them. So neither one of us is wrong. I think both of us, find some beauty in what we have liked. I don't really know the answer to that question because I think we all have an opinion about what beauty is, and it might vary according to circumstances, because what I might think is beautiful, I mentioned this before, to put on my wall in my home, where I'm going to have to look at it every single day. I might not actually find that, beautiful in that setting, but I might find it beautiful in a museum where, doing something that's very, that's very emotionally grating, would not work well for me in my home. So I think sometimes it's situational in nature. I don't have a great answer for that one, honestly.
Well, it's not easy or anything. It's become so confusing for a long while, not that long, but for a while now, that it's difficult to try to pin down what it is. But okay, so why do you think it's loaded? Why do you think it's loaded? It's the term, right?
The term beauty?
Yeah.
Well, the other part about beauty that becomes very loaded is that it just becomes a sort of a a cultural norm for us. And the cultural norms, I think, have done a lot of harm. I think we can all see that over time, people try to look a different way than they actually do look. They don't feel comfortable looking the way that they do, because society has told them that there's this standard of beauty that they're not meeting. And I think from that perspective, it does a lot of harm, and that makes it a pretty loaded question. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing, maybe this goes more to the question of what art is than what beauty is, but I remember, and I kept it with me, that there was a collage artist on Instagram who had put up a picture of a woman that is also an artist on Instagram. She had taken a self-portrait, and they had collaborated on this image, and she's a very lovely woman, but he put the image up and he wrote across her forehead in type, "ugly." And it just instantly made me so uncomfortable, that I thought, this probably is really a great piece, because I'm realizing the kind of the juxtaposition between the idea that there's this really lovely woman, but you've put this really ugly word on top of her. And, so I feel like in some ways it's loaded from the standpoint too, that we take exception, we get feelings hurt, we don't feel good about ourselves because there's some standard that we're not living up to, and other people are judging us because of that standard, if that makes some sense.
Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about how we seem to humans, everyone, mm-hmm. We seem to confuse beauty with the appearance of something.
Yes.
And I think that's where the whole thing about societal standards or whatever mm-hmm. come from. And then like the conflation of that, or rather the confusion of that, and just thinking those things are beauty is mm-hmm. where really the problem is. Mm-hmm. In the sense that it's short-sighted to limit the whole concept of beauty to that. And because it's obviously a lot more than that. First of all, and second of all, I think the tarnished relationship that we have with both nature and the body mm-hmm. Is what causes this crash or this clash that we have with, I guess, what you're calling beauty standards. Mm-hmm. Because, the reason for which everyone considers certain things attractive, and I mean everyone on Earth, like I don't even mean the West or whatever, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because those things are cross-cultural and across time. It's like we all value youth, we all value a person that looks healthy. So mm-hmm. so the appearance of health precedes the appearance of beauty. In my opinion, it's like, that's what I've been thinking about it. So like but because beauty is kind of like the end result in a way, mm-hmm. we think it's the other way around. We think that beauty is what makes a person healthy, but it's the other way around, because obviously survival and mm-hmm. nature precedes everything. And that mm-hmm. is the priority of every single living creature on Earth.
It's biological psychology, basically, that, we are going to be looking for a mate who looks like it's going to be the most viable mate, so that we're going to be producing right. the most viable offspring. And generally speaking, people who look healthy are going to look attractive. They're going right. to look athletic. But it gets broken down to the sense. I mean, there have been studies showing, just how far apart your eyes should be in order for this to be, a person who's really classically beautiful. So it veers off into some kind of crazy avenues, I think. But I totally agree with you, and I think there are a lot of types of beauty. I'm very proud of scars and gray hair and things.
Yeah, for sure.
They sort of mean that I've been through something in life, and I don't consider those to be unbeautiful, but I'm sure that I'm sure other people probably mind.
Sure.
And I don't blame them for it, but but that's what it's always been interesting to me that young people are beautiful people commonly. And as you get older, you know more, and that should count as beauty, but it kind of doesn't count as beauty. So the actual physical beauty fades over time, but you would hope that the inner beauty is going to actually grow.
Yeah, well, I think that's the part where, like, that transition that you just talked about from youth to, you know, aging or older, whatever. Because obviously there's a ton of like older looking ladies out there, or guys, you know, some people, whatever. But I think that's where, or, you know, it's evidence at least that beauty isn't about the appearance of something. So I've been musing also about how beauty is rather a feeling that a person, or, you know, like a experience, something a person experiences. And that is what explains why different people find different things beautiful. And I think that's where the argument that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, which, by the way, I really fucking hate. I hate it when somebody says that. I think that's where this argument comes from. It's an oversimplification. It's short-sighted, and it's a little bit of a cop-out, in my opinion, to say that. But I think it comes from that very thing, that beauty, the experience of beauty, is very meaningful. It feels important. It you know, it causes you to, I mean, I'm not saying that I know what it is. I'm just saying that the feeling of it, whatever it is, calling it beauty, you know, causes you to, it's like, you know, when you're taking the macro photographs, it's like the ability to see stuff out in nature, like a bug or a leaf or whatever, like that closely is like, what? It's, yes. You know, it's like, I'm going to be here for a while looking at this thing because I can't believe this. And, you know, it doesn't have to be macros either. I could just be looking at a flower and be just, this is amazing. Wow. Yeah. But then it's like, that's, I think that's why, you know, you find beauty in these quote unquote darker sort of things, or, you know, some people like the roadkill, seeing something rot, seeing a fruit rotting. I don't really go that far. Yeah, no, but I mean, you know, lots of my previous guests, and I mean, I'm inclined to agree. I mean, the process by which something decomposes and then kind of, because so like I mean, for me, not only does it look interesting how it kind of slowly becomes something else, but how the object, whether it's a leaf or a bug or a fruit or whatever, slowly returns to the earth, to become part of the earth. And it's like, that's really moving. It's like that experience. It's like realizing that kind of becomes like that experience where you get the goosebumps and you're like, wow, that's, you know, that's kind of finding the connectivity between everything.
It is. It's the cycle of life, and it's an important. I didn't mean to suggest that I am in awe of roadkill to some extent, but I don't necessarily spend a lot of time on that. But I don't know if you've ever done much meditation, but the other aspect of that is that there's a tremendous sense of beauty that comes with peace and with being sort of inward. And, you know, so that's part of it too, I think, is finding that beauty that exists inside by sort of letting go of those connections for a moment with the outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, I like that a lot to start finishing off, because we have broken the 50-minute mark, Mrs. Smith Williams. So I'm going to start to close it out. Why don't you tell our listeners and viewers, you know, you want to add anything, where your work can be found? Do you have any upcoming projects that you're excited about?
I have an Etsy shop, and it is at alisasmithwilliams.com. The first name is Alisa. And I'm on Instagram under that same handle, so people can find me there. I don't do other social media, so that's all I'm doing right now. I've toyed with the idea of doing some things like blogs, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So right now I'm just leaving it where it is. Okay. All right. So, well, thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you, Gabriela. I really appreciate your interest in my work and in digital work. And I thank you for giving me that opportunity. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I've been, I think I mentioned it
Instagram thread that I've been wanting to talk to somebody who works exclusively in digital media for a while now, because I mean, I do not have the patience for the generators. I've played a little bit with them, you know, but I don't have the patience to like fiddle with the prompt and do whatever, seed it and whatever. I'm just going to draw it. Forget it.
But you did a beautiful job with the drawing, so good on you for that.
Yeah, it's just, you know, in a way, yeah. Anyway, the thing is that, yeah, that's, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me, especially with AI art being kind of prickly. I mean, I don't know how prickly it is still, but a little, you know, maybe.
It's still out there, but we'll work on it.
Yeah, they'll calm down eventually. All right, so thank you again, Alisa, for joining me. Thank you for your time, for your words and your thoughts. Thank you everyone for joining us. Feel free to let Alisa and I know what you think of this conversation in the comments. I encourage you to like this video and share it with any and all pertinent individuals, as it helps the channel, and this way more people can listen to these interviews. Finally, I invite you to subscribe to my audiovisual channel because I have more conversations scheduled. If you want to support Alisa, myself, this podcast, or all three, the links will be in the show notes. Thank you everyone, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.